Did you get in there?
Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 24th, 2026 school board meeting. May I have the roll call, please, Patty?
Yes. Jennifer Schoen. Here. Skip Clues. Here. Stephen Adler.
Here.
Byron Maddow.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Nancy Claver.
Here.
Fish Campbell.
Here.
Lee Hudson.
Here.
Eric Moore.
Here.
Nathan Delaney.
Thank you. Can everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcements or recognitions.
I look at that newsletter we get from the high school
Yes.
and every week. And I mean, there were just some really cool things in there where we had, I think we may have talked about it the last time, Nathan Watton, Wotton. He was recognized as the American Choral Directors Association as one of the best choral director teachers in the world. Well, I'm not quite sure that's right, but you get my gist. Then we had 5 Portsmouth Middle School students who are winners in the Week of the Italian Language in the World. They met, I believe it was in Boston. And so we had 5 Portsmouth Middle School students that attended that. We had Portsmouth High School journalist students who went to New York City with Mrs. McBride and Mrs. Maloney. And they attended the Columbia Scholastic Press Association Spring Convention. We had CTE student Giles Therese. He placed first in the graphic design competition for the New Hampshire Future Business Leaders of America. And we have, another thing I think is really impressive is there are several job opportunities and internships that our kids can do. And one of them, I always wanted to do this. You can go to Star Island for the summer and get a job if you're a high school student. I think that's really cool. Portsmouth, Prescott Park is looking for high school students for jobs. UNH has summer internships that students can participate in. 2026 CTE Teacher of the Year. I think you talked about that at our last meeting, Mr. Reynolds. And then, of course, we had the Maple Open House Day at Lister Academy on Saturday. And I guess that was a huge success. And then, Lisa, your children received, oh gosh, I lost the piece of paper. Both of Lisa's children have received journalistic awards for their outstanding essays, poems, whatever. Maybe do you want to talk about it? Well, I lost my.
We had announced, I think, several weeks back, the number of visual arts students who won Scholastic Awards in the Scholastic Arts. And my kids and Simon Noel also won awards for Scholastic Writing.
Awesome.
So that was also very cool. Now, 2 other quick announcements. So in the arts vein, we have right now just opened yesterday at the Portsmouth Public Library, the annual Splash exhibit, which is students K-8. It's a really fantastic display of artwork that's done at all the elementary schools and the middle school, and it is open and free to the public and a lot of fun. There's some really cool work there. And my secret favorite art show of the year is the Monster Collaborative exhibit, which is really fabulous. It's some elementary kids at Don Darrow in 2nd grade who draw pictures of monsters and then hand those off to the high school where the ceramic students do sculptures from the drawings. And then they do a joint exhibit at the high school library. And that's going to be on Friday, April 10th at 3:30. And it's super fun. Byron.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to, I was able to attend the Maple Open House, whatever it was called. It was fantastic. Really cool to see that Sugar Shack back there. And then maybe this was already talked about, but tomorrow is the music festival, the Chamber Music Festival on the 25th. got a chance to go last year. And it's really awesome to see young people sort of express, and it's a great vibe in there. So I'll be going again tomorrow. Really
It's also a lot of fun. Thank you. Any other announcements? We have so many cool things going on in the schools. We could probably do the announcements for 3 hours, but we do. If that is all on that, I will move on to the consent agenda, which is to approve 2 sets of minutes, the non-public minutes for March 10th and the public minutes for March 10th. I have a motion to approve those under
So
the consent
moved.
agenda. Second, do we just on Zoom?
Yep, she's
Okay, do we
there.
have to do roll call?
Yep.
Thank you, Patty.
Consent agenda. Kip Clues. Stephen Adler. Jennifer Shump.
Yes.
Byron Matto.
abstain.
Brian French.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Lee Hudson. Approved.
We'll now open public comment, and I'm not sure if anyone here is here for regular public comment or if you're here to speak on the public hearing on open enrollment. But if you're here for anything other than open enrollment and you'd like to speak, please feel free to come forward, state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm Esther Kennedy, and first I'd like to thank the superintendent for taking my call today. Appreciate that, Zach. Thank you. I want me to sit. Okay.
Be comfortable.
I am very taken back that we are putting applications out for position in middle management, assistant director of special needs. And you don't even have it in the budget yet. So normally you wait and so you get your budget. And then you put the position out, especially in middle management. If teachers are already in the spot and there's retirements and you fill them, I get that. This is a new position. So I was really taken back that that's out. And because as you know, I don't feel it's appropriate. I feel that we should be looking at our coordinators and beefing them up a little bit, give them a little extra money, and give them the ability to make decisions in the buildings and give more input and have more staunch behind them. So you can make decisions in individual schools on what's best to make sure we keep kids in our district. So I think that this is jumping the gun. I feel as a taxpayer it's jumping the gun, and I also feel that morally it's jumping a gun, putting a position out, trying to fill a position, interviewing for a position, and not having the money yet to pay for that position. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made in our city right now. As you know, the budgets are up all over the place, and I think it's really too early to do that. Lastly, I was serious when I said that they do have a $7 million contingency fund, as Nate confirmed, for insurance. And as you know, or maybe don't know, money is being put in when you get money back from school choice. It gets put into that account for a rainy day. So in other words, over the years, you've gotten back. So right now the account is around 400,000 to the good. Now that isn't with the most recent amount, but it's still 400,000 to the good. 1 year you got back $1 million. So I just really think that there's a reason for that account. Right now it has 7 million in it. We need to utilize it for our teachers. Thank you.
We speak in everybody good phone. We have anybody for public comment on Zoom? That will conclude public comment for now, and I will now open our public hearing on open enrollment. If anybody in the room would like to come to speak specifically to that issue, you are welcome to come up for that. Welcome back, Esther.
Since I'm here.
See, we should have given you the chair for longer.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pig Green Ave. And tomorrow's a big day. We're all going to testify on open enrollment. And I think for many schools, it's going to be very difficult, especially when you look at special needs. I know right now in the bill, it says that the responsibility is of the sending district for that. However, I think when it gets down to the pennies and cents, it's going to be really hard to distinguish. And I think that could be very, especially if if a child comes to your district, and then you make some decisions that it will cost more than if they stayed in their own district, which I think would happen in some districts like myself and like Portsmouth that have the financial capabilities to do that. Especially if they come from a district, the child comes from a district that can be very, that might not be as healthy and financially and might not be giving as much in supports as a district that might be giving more. So I would encourage people to go to testify tomorrow at 1 o'clock if you have concerns. I know they've moved it, but I really think open enrollment in a concept is not a bad idea. It allows you to go to schools and it's gonna make those schools that can't function, which we all know the schools that are having a hard time functioning, actually up their game. We're all gonna compete for the same children. And I don't care what district you go to. I mean, I've been in 16 districts as a mentor. So I've been part of so many districts and right now I'm a mentor to Manchester. But, so I don't care what district you're in, it's just really gonna make sure that you do the best so that you can attract those kids and we all are looking for numbers. I don't care what district you're in, everyone is down in numbers. So, however, what I'm having a problem with is I don't think we have fine-tuned what this should look like. And the 80% is just kind of thrown out there and really not have a lot behind it. As we know, some students can cost us more, some students can cost us less. So I would encourage everyone to testify in your opinion. Might not be even my opinion, that we might not agree, but still you have the right to testify. And I think it's important for people to show up. I do believe for districts like mine and districts like this district, the wealthier district, it's gonna be difficult. And the other thing is no one has clarified, as people send into my district, people send into their kids in this district. What does it mean for those sending districts? They just opened a law that said anyone that wants to can now question their area agreement, even if there's a timeline that could be questioned, which is a start for that conversation. But we as a district in Portsmouth depend on a really high amount of money to come in. Well, if this goes into effect, you're gonna only have to get 80% of that amount, especially if they open up their contract, which they have the right to do. In our district, the sending district did open their contract. We didn't change anything, they've closed it, but that did happen this past 4 months. So I think that is something that needs to be clarified. And anyone that's speaking from this district, I think that would be something that you definitely want to speak upon because it could be 80% less in our budget. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room who would like to speak on open enrollment? Anyone online? Nope. I will close the public hearing on open enrollment and move to the superintendent's report.
So, have a couple of things. We had an email that went to the board just around our principal search and the process of notifying candidates. So I've had some follow-up with folks. Appreciate that perspective, and we're always trying to be thoughtful about making sure that this is an appealing place for people to apply to, and that people feel good about our process. I will say that this was a critique on kind of the timing of some of those notifications. And again, we'll think about how we can approach that differently in the future. I will say broadly, I've also received a lot of feedback that's been really positive about, how we went about that high school process as well. So, then have a memo just from me to you as we came out of last week's conversation with around school care and how the council was ultimately going to approach it. Very appreciative on behalf of our employees that we're in a situation where even if the city feels that the city continues to have its concerns about the legality of the assessment, but ultimately, valued making sure that our employees felt like they knew what was going to happen with their insurance going forward, and that's been a big weight lifted off of our employees, and I appreciate the council making the decision, because the decision to spend those additional funds are not something that we're going to be within our purview, so the council needed to make that choice, and I appreciate the council making that choice. One of the things that we know, and I think the mayor spoke to it that night, was the request that both the city departments and asked that you, through us, would look at ways to help mitigate some of those assessment costs in this particular operating year. That there may be a utilization of some of the health stabilization fund the city had developed back in 2002, but that they'd like to be able to offset some of those costs and not have it exclusively come from that health stabilization fund, in part because their own policy says they can only take 25% a year out of that fund. Change and adjust policy if they want to do that. So we are already working on our side on what we can do to try to figure out what spending for this particular year we can reasonably hold back on. We're exploring all those opportunities, and we look forward to coming back to you with more detail the next time we meet about kind of what steps have we already started to take in the interim, and then what additional steps we'd like to talk to you about to be part of that conversation, that decision-making process. I don't know, I think that's where I'm at on it for now.
I would just echo our appreciation for the city attorneys, for the council, and everyone who's been working on this for these many months to try to come to a resolution that maintains benefits for our staff. It's the right thing to do for all of them, and it also obviously gives them a lot of peace of mind to not have this overhang that they're worried about. I did say at the council when I spoke, we also want to do our very best to preserve jobs for everyone. We're already presenting a budget to the city manager that cuts 4.5 full-time positions. So we're looking in as many ways as we can to trim where we can without losing people. That will not be easy, but we will do our best. And that ultimately the reductions that we're looking at in the budget will come back to the board for a vote. So once we're able to get some idea of where we can find those savings, we will have the opportunity to take those recommendations and to vote on them as a board so that the council sees that we are all recommending to them where those funds come from. Is there any other, Byron?
Yeah, thanks. I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think that I just wanted to express that the position that the city was in relative to school care was extremely difficult, and there really wasn't a winning position to take there in terms of, we were going to save some amounts of money, and I think that the fight that could have taken place relative to school care put really undue risk to our staff in the school department, and so I think the wisdom of the decision to ultimately make the payment was a good one, and I really appreciate that, it's to what you were saying, Lisa, all the work that's on the council side and the city manager and everyone there. So I don't think it's an ideal outcome, but I think it's the best path forward.
Okay, as we move out of school care, again, we will be returning with more information, but as we move into that, 2 items of correspondence that don't require action on your part, but just notification. One is Brian, and then Brian's let me know that this will be wrapping up his time with us in June of this year. Super appreciative of all the work that Brian's done in the district, and I know, I'm sure we're gonna find out in the next couple of days where Brian's going next, because I think he's gonna be a hotly sought after commodity. But he's given us his notice that his time with us will wrap up on at the end of this particular fiscal year. And we're already in the process. We posted, and we hope we can find someone to fill Brian's shoes.
Brian, I want to thank you for all your hard work for our district. It's been a pleasure to know you, and thank you for your dedication to our district for the time that you've been here. And we wish you the very best as you move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed working with all of you, so.
Second item is a letter of retirement from Kathy Ritchie at Dondero School, support specialist. So wish Kathy the best as she moves on into retirement, and we'll start looking for the replacement position.
Okay. Move on to the administrator report.
In your backup, you'll see your expenditure report in there. Not much change from last month. Still shooting down the middle. We talk a little more about the balance and everything else as we get to old business. Zach discussing some other issues. Revenue is also where it should be at this point. As we get towards the end of the year, we send out our second bill to SAU 50 for our tuition, and we start kind of squaring up food service, because that goes right to the very end. And we got to figure out what has to get moved over to even that out. But otherwise, everything there's nothing, no anomalies, nothing in the ordinary, no unexpected expenses. We've actually done pretty good this year on a tight budget, so everyone's been responsible.
Jen, I see a question.
I just want clarity so my brain can wrap myself around it. But you have special education elementary, special education middle school, special education secondary, and then down on the bottom it says special education separate. Help me.
That is a separate account that is not through the operating account. That is cost center 207, which basically all that encompasses is special ed teachers in Paris only. So,
Okay, so then the other special ed budget items are,
Lister Academy, that's cost center 206. That is special ed expense.
You mean like Jen, just clarify, so like you're looking at like 151, 152, 153,
and then 207.
and then 207.
Yes.
Uh,
Pretty much.
So what's the difference between those?
Well, the 207 is mainly high school expenses, and well, there is another special ed expense. There's actually out of district is technically
Is what
out of district.
out of district has its line item in there.
But out of district, that's another spent line. But it's just the way this has been set up since before I got here. I've been trying to merge these since I've been here, and we're slowly getting there, but it's not something you fix.
So is there a difference between the two or the three or four?
207, so 207 is this artifact of a period of time where it's a break off, and Brian, correct me when I get any of this wrong. But effectively, as tuitions come in from SAU 50, we skim off a certain portion to cover special education funds. And that's where the bulk of the 207 money is. 207 also Medicaid
and sped aid.
And sped aid. So it's a bucket of those things, and then it gets redistributed to pay for certain special education expenditures. I think we had it in the when we gave you during the budget cycle the organizational chart.
Yeah.
We had certain people, and they would have special funds
Got it.
they were associated with.
Yeah.
207, some of them were 207.
Yeah.
And you
So-
would see, it was like a lot of the high school special educators or paras, because of the idea that when possible, we want those, not that all the money is from SAU 50, but a good chunk of it is in terms of that, again, the break off the special education costs. So those, when possible, we tend to reallocate those funds towards those things that are like SAU 50 kids are gonna be part of the high school special education experience, that type of thing.
Okay, and then where would legal fees be in this document?
That would be under central office.
Central office.
I think Lee and then Steve.
I think my question got answered.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I double check. I think what I heard you say anyway was 207 was very related to high school.
Mainly in high school, yes.
Okay. And so that you're trying to, or we're ultimately going to combine with 153, which is secondary, or are we still going to leave all?
That's,
three separate.
it's a bigger thing to move than just to merge it in 1 year. I've been doing it since I got here 2 years ago, and I know we went into a little bit more in-depth last budget cycle, not this budget cycle, because I wanted you all to be aware of it. Slowly trying to get it to a point where we can merge it in, but we've had budget challenges with the city that haven't allowed it to be as smoothly as we'd like to.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's this revenue. So it's a spot where revenue dumps in, not in the normal way. And then it goes off to cover various things. And at different points, it's been a different amount of money. There are different costs associated with, so it's, well, thank you, Siri. But I think the desire is that this is a weird artifact of another time.
Yep.
And so, but then it backfills different other lines. So we want to make it clean.
Okay.
But it's been a slow go. And this has been a conversation. I know when I walked in the door, this was one of the first things that Nathan had been talking to me about. Like, he had a desire to, like, how do we clean this up? I think it's a great conversation for the finance committee to have some conversations about, to talk about in more depth, because I think there's a desire for sure to really not have 207 broken out as an independent if we could.
Yeah. Okay. But we'd still try and maintain 151, not 52, 153.
Right.
Just
right. We're trying to figure out a way to a way to pull that off that works.
okay.
Yeah. And every time we get close, we're just there's this long story about why it exists the way it exists, and then how it impacts really, which we cover certain FTEs across the district. But it's a detailed conversation.
And it has been, this has been in effect for probably a couple decades.
Yeah.
So.
Steve, you had a question?
Just a question, I think, and you may have answered this in the past. So I'm looking at something like Little Harbor School, where we're 98,000 in the red. But when you look at the amount budgeted, and my sense, if I was gonna guess, I guess that there was some staffing shifting somewhere that ended up in.
There may be, but it's not always staffing too. It could be unexpected expense. I mean, that's not a huge number in comparison to their total budget for Little Harbor School. If that exceeds maybe 10%, I start getting a little bit worried. But when I look at the bottom line, which is what we operate on a bottom line budget in this district. I'm still at $4.5 million of balance today, or not today, at the end of February. So it's.
And you still haven't done the total, even though you have that available balance is in the red, the amount you've expended is less than the full budget. Is that correct?
Balance is in the black, right?
Yeah, the balance is black, $4.5 million in the positive.
Yeah.
So overall, if you add all those numbers in the available balance line, you get $4.5 million, 4.58 million to the positive from Fund 11 down the bottom.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? All right, we will move on to budget.
I think budget, pretty much my memo covered most of what we do tonight. It's just that awareness of the fact that we're gonna be trying to respond to the mayor's request and then come back to you with some options next week.
Okay, thank you. I will briefly touch on the board retreat, which has been set for May 12th at 6 p.m. in place of our regular Tuesday board meeting that night. I am looking for people to indicate if they have a conflict or forever hold their peace and show up for that meeting. We really try to get full attendance, and we moved it from the previous day due to a conflict that
said it's at 6 p.m.
I think 6 p.m. Is that where we land?
I thought we were gonna try to shoot earlier if we could.
I will not look.
Well, we can have the earlier conversation, but let's start with the 12th as a day. And an after dark sort of time. We can adjust the time. If there's availability to start sooner, that's always better. But knowing people come from work, if 6 is the earliest, then we would stay with that. So if you discover in the very near future that you have a conflict, please let us know. Otherwise, we're going to assume that that's a go and that we have full attendance for that. That's an important conversation. I think next we have consideration and approval of our community engagement committee, which I believe Steve is going to speak to. And just to refresh everyone's memory, we had previously agreed as a board to approve a working group to discuss whether we need this type of a committee, and if so, what should its purpose be? How often should it meet? How many members would be on it? So that's a proposal we have in the packet tonight.
This is Nancy's
Sorry.
brainchild, so I'm gonna have Nancy speak to it.
Okay, Nancy.
I'm gonna pass this out. Eric, I don't know if I need enough for everybody. But you can share. You can share with me. We had our first meeting last week, Steve, Jen and I, and we had an incredibly wonderful meeting. The enthusiasm, the ideas, it was really a great meeting. So we solved all the problems in the world.
Great. Meeting adjourned.
But anyway, we came up with the idea, the goals would be to gain a better understanding of community issues and concerns, develop community awareness and knowledge of the role of the school board and of current initiatives and issues, and generate supportive school and board proposals, including the school budget. So some of the ideas we had was to have a board member attend PTA, PTO meetings, have board members attend city council meetings where students are being recognized. Me being around for so long, we used to have, like, if the basketball team won the state championship, we would have them come to a school board meeting and we would recognize them and give them a little gift. And then the city council would do the same thing. So we found that the kids were choosing to go to the city council rather than the school board. So we stopped doing it at the school board level. So my idea was to have, to talk to the mayor and the city manager and say, when you recognize these athletes or the people in the play or, whatever students we're recognizing, could you let us know and we'll attend? School board members could attend. And we could be part of that presentation where they recognize our athletes, our actresses, our whatever.
So Nancy, I'm sorry, but do we want to have a motion to?
Oh, sure.
We have in the packet
Motion to.
linked the actual proposal for the committee, which is filled out. Steve submitted. So if we could have a motion
Motion to approve.
and a
Second.
second. Fabulous. And then you may continue with the discussion. I just didn't want to skip that step.
Then
Sorry.
the third, thank you, Lisa. The third item was to attend school sports events, which I think a lot of us do anyway. But the fourth was to set up a booth at the farmer's market on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to noon at the City Hall parking lot from May 1st to November 1st. I had a conversation with our city manager and she's willing, the city has a booth and they're willing to give us X number of Saturdays. I don't know how many yet. I thought if this got approved, I would go back to her and say, how many do you want to give us? It could be that we would get one a month. So we would have to set up the booth. We would have to be there. But there are some really cool things. We have a Portsmouth High School graduate who was an astronaut. Richard DeCessor was his name. And if you go to the Krista McAuliffe Museum in Concord, his picture is on the wall. And it's recognized as a Portsmouth High School grad who is an astronaut. So I'm sure we were talking about it at our meeting, there's lots of stories like that about Portsmouth High grads that we could put up in this booth, let the public know.
If they started their own electrician company, we can support,
Right.
Portsmouth alumni, yeah.
Yeah. I know 2 grads, one works for the Yankees, one works for the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're both Portsmouth High grads. One's the chief, when you fall down, what do they call that person?
Physical
Therapist, whatever. He runs out on the field. If you're watching the Arizona Diamondbacks, you see Max Esposito. He runs out on the field to take care of the player that that got
And I
hurt.
think it
So
was also in the packet, yes?
what?
The minutes from the meeting?
Well, this is it.
Okay.
This is the minutes from the meeting. Did you see something else? Okay. And then, so we were thinking, oh, and also I was talking to Bob Lister. Do you know that Portsmouth High School is celebrating its 200th anniversary in 2027? So it was founded in 1827. So it's celebrating its 200th birthday. So we could this committee could maybe get involved with something like that. Then we thought of the booth, maybe we could have some pamphlets to talk about the schools and some,
Swag.
wag. Okay, then the fifth item was, if you notice on the city newsletter, the city manager has coffee with at the library once a month. And so we thought maybe we could have coffee with the school board at the public library, maybe not once a month, but that was just another idea we tossed around.
This is all in the board packet. That's what I was trying to say.
Well-
The entire agenda, the minutes are all in the packet.
Yes, these are the minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So people
Well,
have.
I just passed it out. No, I just passed it out
No,
to
it's
everybody.
in the agenda.
It's linked.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Oh, it is?
Everybody
Yeah.
has.
Oh, I
it.
didn't know it was in there. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
it's okay.
Oh, so I don't have to be going through all of this then? Okay, did everybody have a chance to look at it?
That's okay.
I just throw one in. So what essentially the committee is gonna do is it'll be sort of like a spreadsheet of coordinating when board members might have the opportunity to, like, we will probably sift through, identify which of these ideas we want to prioritize. And the main role of the committee will be just to creating a spreadsheet for when different board members can attend these different events so that we can connect better with the community. We won't be writing the content for this, but we'll be organizing the connection times.
And making sure, bringing like community awareness of like when we have our more board meetings, how can they find agendas? Basically just like handing that to the community so we can hopefully get more engagement.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up or was that?
I did. So one of the things that I was thinking about as part of this and wondering if we can incorporate into that is I'll say a dedicated engagement with special education parents, just to get sort of system-wide or at least system level and facility level type of feedback that we can bring back to the board.
I think that's a great idea. And I think a lot of the things that you brought up, Nancy, are fantastic ideas. And I'm really glad that this group got together and tried to look at a big picture idea of starting to get us back engaged with the community on a level that I don't think we've really been since before the pandemic. I mean, I can remember when I was more involved in the PTA at Little Harbor back in the day, like we always had somebody from the school board who would just show up at the meetings. Just say, hi, I'm with the school board. You have any questions? You can ask me. And I think that level of us just taking the time where we can to show up where people are and meet them where they're doing the things that they care about in this community and in the schools, it's good for everybody. It lets people know us. It lets us have a better idea of what's going on. So I'm a huge fan of this. And just to sort of put on the record what the proposal was, it was to foster relationships in the community to better inform the public of the activities of the school board. The committee will identify opportunities for board members to engage with students, staff, families, and community members, and then facilitate board member participation in, various things going on in the community. So that was sort of the overall mission. And then as the committee meets and becomes aware of things that we might want to get involved in, they can certainly communicate that in the best way that they think works. And we can hopefully all have a stronger presence. I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. One is, if I'm understanding this correctly, it won't be necessarily the committee members who will do this connecting, but they will foster having the whole board connect. Is that right? Okay.
Exactly.
We kind of are default though.
Okay. That's good. Because I actually do think we need some default people to make sure it really happens.
Yeah.
Because there was a time where we all sort of, offered to
Intended.
take certain meetings, but it didn't, end up happening. So, and then my other question is, I know that one of the reasons this idea came up over time was because we have this challenge with our public comment where people can give us input, but they don't get any response. And so there was a desire on the part of the community to have more opportunities for actual back and forth dialogue. So I guess I'm wondering whether that's going to be a piece of this. And it sounds like maybe the farmer's market kind of thing is a place where that can happen. But to what degree is that something that this committee could specifically on? So coming up with like a protocol for how that happens or
Well, I think
creating
you have-
more venues for that to happen?
We have to remember we're one of 9. So if you're at the farmer's market and somebody comes up and asks you a question that requires a vote of the board, you can, that would be the answer. You know, I'm one of 9, so I really can't comment on that. But as a board member, you could say, I'll bring that back to the board. For
But maybe they
future
could at least
discussion.
get their specific questions answered if it's something have knowledge on, I guess.
I would hope that that could happen, and I also think as we get our committees sort of on a more regular schedule, we could certainly tell people, oh, you have a question about this issue, you might be able to go to the facilities committee. Or you have a question about this, that sounds like a policy question, and sort of try to help people understand. Because we've certainly had a
Oh,
lot
great.
of community issues that have bubbled up over the last few years where people feel a little bit like, oh, I went to this place in the city and they told me to go to the schools, who told me to go to the city, and nobody's intentionally bouncing people around, but there's just a lot of overlap in responsibilities. So I think to the extent that we can give people a place where we can hear what their concern is and try to tell them where are some next places they can go if we don't have the ability on the spot to answer, I think that's really good. But I agree with you, people should be able to have answers when they have questions.
Okay.
Is there other discussion on this? So we can go roll call vote to approve the community engagement committee.
Jen Shump,
You can.
Yes.
Dick Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay,
Our next meeting is April 6th at 12 noon.
you beat me to my next question, Nancy.
Yeah, so
Right.
we're really good. I was really impressed with the enthusiasm and it was great.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, we move on to consideration and approval of policies. I'll turn it over to Pip.
We have a lot of policies tonight. So right now we're looking at the second reading, the group for second reading. Is there a motion to vote on them all as a batch or individually?
Make a motion to approve as a batch all of the
I'm
old.
gonna call on Lee first, and I
Oh,
think he's
sorry.
gonna change your motion, sorry.
Yeah, because I actually want to put a motion forward to change some terminology and.
Okay.
And IMEH,
Do you wanna?
separate that
So a
out.
batch except for IMAH.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
You'd be willing to make that
Absolutely.
motion?
Yep.
Second.
Thank you. We need to do roll call because we have Tish on Zoom.
Yep.
Well, wait a minute, shouldn't
No,
we have
sorry.
discussion first?
Yep.
Okay.
I had too many copies.
She's trying to run an efficient meeting.
I know, well, I mean, I don't have to report on all of them, you all went over them at the last meeting. Are there any questions specifically about any of these policies included, besides IMAH at the moment? For discussion,
Some of these because of new state laws or
most of them are.
most of them are.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yes,
that's
and,
what's on our
um,
choice.
I don't think any one of them had substantial changes and certainly not since last reading of them. Okay, then let's entertain a motion to, sorry, let's vote on
We're
that.
taking a roll call vote to approve on second reading EBBCA, IMBA, JIC, and JLCK.
Thanks. Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump, Pip Clues.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay. Now, there a separate motion.
Motion to approve IMAH on second reading.
Second.
Wonderful. Now we can discuss that, and I believe you have a proposed language that you'd like to add to the policy. So you would make a motion to amend the policy and propose your language that you'd like to add.
Would this have to be a friendly amendment though? Because we just had the motion to approve the policy.
So then you take the amendment, and then if the amendment passes, then that goes into the motion, right?
I mean, if.
Yeah, so
Be a friendly-
my understanding is the motion that was on the floor
Is to approve
is
it,
to approve IMAH.
and now we have
Now we have a
language.
now we started, and then it would be an amendment. I would like to amend IMAH to read whatever it is. And then there's a second potentially on the amendment, and then there's the opportunity to discuss the
I was
amendment.
gonna say, if he offers it as a friendly amendment
Yeah,
and it's amicable to the motion maker, we don't have to vote. Just.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
So would you like to offer a friendly amendment?
I'll be a friendly amendment or
Yeah.
a friendly motion to amend. And so a couple of cleanup things real quick. So lines 5 to 6. They're just changing the at least to just 4. Also on line 6, changing as a way to, you're just eliminating as a way, just to minimize health risks.
Sorry, which line was that?
That's line 6.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And then on line 8, before the board recommends the following practices, I would like to propose that we add in to advance these objectives. The board expects district-wide implementation to ensure equitable access to daily physical activity, recess, and physical education opportunities across all schools. Participation alongside peers shall be default expectation, supported through reasonable programmatic modifications, accessible spaces, appropriate supervision, and suitable equipment. Exclusion from participation shall not occur solely due to generalized safety concerns, resource limitations, lack of equipment, administrative convenience, or funding constraints. So that's one portion. And then what I did was actually bump down a couple of the bullet points. So I bumped down F and, or sorry, yes, I bumped down F and G. So they became H and I. And part of the reason I did that is because it felt like it fit well with committing adequate resources to include program funding, personnel, safe equipment, and facilities. So F ended up, or what I would propose is that we put in F being discourage routine use of segregated or alternative activities in physical education or recess when participation can be supported through reasonable modifications and supervision. Safety restrictions shall follow an established administrative process that considers reasonable alternatives first. The administration shall monitor the frequency of alternative activities identified and address recurring barriers. So that was what I put in for F. And then G is maintaining a district-wide process to identify and address participation barriers, including accessible spaces and appropriate equipment. When barriers are identified, the administration shall implement corrective actions with assigned responsibility and timelines.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, please.
Can we table this, take his recommendations and discuss it at our next meeting? I mean, that's a lot for us to
Visually
digest.
see it.
Yeah, I think it would be worth
You just
bringing it back to the
say.
To the
policy so we
policy
can
committee?
put all
Yeah.
this in.
And that's why I sent it to you and sent it to Lisa. Well,
Yeah.
I know, it's fine.
Yeah, I think,
Because I was hoping that that would get discussed in the policy committee and then we would, this is all, it is a lot.
No, the timing was just that we
Yeah,
didn't
I know.
have the ability to do it between
these
the
two
last meeting
Yeah.
and now, but I think it could go
But it
back to the
makes
next
sense.
policy committee.
Yeah, I think that's.
I appreciate all your additions. I think they're really gonna be valuable. But I agree that people need a chance to read through it again and see
Yes.
how.
I agree.
So,
So,
So what do
I
we do?
think
How do we unwind this?
you would roll back your friendly amendment.
Yep,
And then the maker of the motion would essentially rescind their motion. Yeah.
You made the original motion, I think.
Yeah.
So I will dial back that motion as well,
And you can dial back your second. Okay,
Yep.
done.
and I will move to table and refer to policy.
perfect. Thank you.
Second,
Second.
you need a roll call on that.
Okay, so we're gonna be.
Wait, what is
moving-
the vote on?
It's a table.
Oh, just gonna.
We rescind the motion, then you don't need to vote on it, right?
No, because we
No,
tabled
we're
the
gonna-
policy. So I,
Oh, so we're voting to table the policy.
To send it back to
Yeah.
policy committee.
Okay, so someone has to make that motion.
That's what-
Oh, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
that's what she-
Yes.
yes.
so
Okay.
who made the motion for, to send it back, Lisa?
Lisa did.
And then Brian?
Byron, thank you.
Byron.
Sorry.
And Steve.
Sure, Brian second.
Thank you.
You thirded it.
Sorry, guys.
No.
Okay,
Thank you, Lee.
We got there.
You bet.
So this was just so we could practice all the different terms.
Robert's rule exercise.
okay, Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Tiff Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you. And we thank you for taking the time to write
Yeah,
the language. I think that the more that we can do that, even if it does mean that we have to push it back 2 weeks, I'd rather do that and get it right and have everybody have the time to look at the language and think it through. Because the issues you're raising are really important and it deserves the attention.
I
So
was trying to think about how we're gonna be able to accomplish that sooner than I can actually just put it up on the screen instead.
we have had the conversation as well, and I think the technical challenge is because Patty's on Zoom, being able to have that computer also run a separate document at the same time is crazy.
challenging.
Because I agree, if we could find a way to put the language up there so that we could modify in real time, that would be really efficient. But we just haven't technically figured out how to do that simultaneous with Zoom. All right, moving forward to new business. I will turn it over to you, Patty, for sabbatical leave.
So this is just a report to let you know that this would be the normal meeting that we would be approving sabbaticals, but none were proposed, so there are none to approve.
Oh, I
but
thought
this
you were
would
going on
be-
sabbatical.
We did go on sabbatical. But this is when it would happen. There were none and there's no action to be taken, so moving right along.
Thank you. Next, consideration and approval of employment. And I will turn it over to you.
So we have, I think, as we've discussed with the board, we have 3 school psychologist positions in the last year. We had to contract out 2 equivalent of 2 of those roles. And so we've been, really working hard to try to make sure we have in-house people next year filling all 3. And so the first of those is Catherine Sanat, who we have gone through a full process, including us. And we're happy to bring her back to New England with your approval. Serve in this role.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? We'll call a vote, please.
Tiff Clues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto.
Yep.
Brian French.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you. Next, we have consideration and approval of a leave of absence.
So you have a request from Mandy Goodwin, who's a teacher at Dundero School, who is completing a year of parental leave, and under the contract has the ability to request one additional year, but it is at the discretion of the district. I've received this request. It's my recommendation to you that you approve the request. And that's where I would leave it for now.
Motion to approve Amanda Goodwin's continued leave of absence.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Byron Matto.
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Tiff Clues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you. Next, we have consideration and approval of a donation to CTE. Brian?
Yes, we had two vehicles that were donated to our CTE program, a 2010 Audi A4 valued at $1,600 and 2005 Lexus RX 330 valued at $4,100. Both these cars were donated by community members and are being utilized to provide our automotive students with necessary hands-on experience. They don't get to
race them.
they don't get to work on these higher, well, the thing is, they need to work on cars that have a lot of electrical components, and both these cars do. So it actually works out really, really well. So we ask that the board accept these donations.
I make a motion that we accept,
Second.
and I have a comment.
Okay, any discussion?
Can people donate their cars? I mean, is that a usual?
I mean, they can, I mean, I'm sure if everyone donated their cars, we may run out of space, but you know. We're not looking for the ones that are getting towed in pieces. Because I think we're probably driven in, and dropped off, so.
I just donated a car to the Salvation Army. I could have donated it to the CTE. Maybe we could have our community engagement committee talk about how we can donate cars.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump.
Yes.
Kip Clues.
Yes.
Stephen Adler.
Yes.
Byron Matto.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you. Next, we have consideration and approval of teacher contracts. I'll turn it back over to you.
So you have a list, again, this is similar to sabbatical. This is the meeting on an annual basis where you are presented with the teachers we're renominating for contracts for the upcoming year under the APT contract. We need to notify teachers by April 1st of their ability to return for the upcoming year. This represents the list that has been put forward by principals and by central office for those renewals for the upcoming season.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Absolutely. Stephen Adler.
Yes.
Kip Clues.
Yes.
Jen Shump.
Yes.
Byron Matto.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you. Now we move on to consideration and approval of open enrollment.
So-
We'll turn it back over. to
Yes,
you.
and I would say if you read my memo, I think the title of this particular item is not necessarily, that's my mistake in what I given to staff. We're not looking to pass the policy tonight. What I wanted to make you aware of in the memo is the process by which we would potentially adopt a policy. And I've been in consultation with the city, with legal, kind of making sure we have the right path forward. I think we have on multiple occasions, the board has indicated over the last year where its position was in terms of its values in relation to the current open enrollment, kind of the open enrollment conversation at the state level and where the board wants to position itself. I laid out things in here that I think are reflective of that conversation of the letter that was sent to the state, reflecting that position. And so if we're going to move ahead at the moment, it seems to me that the best course of action is to move in a direction that other districts have moved in, which is to be very clear that we have a policy that responds to the possibility of open enrollment. And that policy would be broadly a zero in, zero out policy. So if we were to move in that direction, then my recommendation to you is I lay out for you a timeline of the things that we would need to do to come to our conclusion, and then to move that proposal to the city for their consideration as the city council is our legislative body. In some communities where we have a town meeting form of government and a standalone district, they're going to the voters. But because the city council represents our legislative body, we would be going to the city. So this is more of a check-in to verify that this continues to be reflective of where you all are, and then give you a heads up that we would then come back with a more formalized proposal to kind of put the meat on the bones of this skeleton that we're talking about that has been vetted. by legal, and come back to you for further discussion at our next meeting. And then start this process. But we
Thank
wanna
you.
check. Yep.
So I believe that the process, I mean, for most communities around the state, they went to their town meeting days earlier this month and put it directly to voters as part of having their budget approved. So for our structure, I believe the council would have to take up open enrollment over a series of 3 meetings so that they are able to have deliberation and a public hearing on open enrollment at the council level. And in order to facilitate that, if we choose to encourage them to go down that path, we would want to make a recommendation to the council. We would want the school board to make a recommendation to the council on what we would like them to contemplate as they look at what they would like to do for open enrollment for our community. And just to put kind of a little bit of an explanation on the philosophy behind the 0 in, 0 out, just in case anyone's not familiar with all of this jargon. The intention with that is essentially that we maintain stability for all of our schools across the seacoast and across the state by essentially saying we're not going to send any of our kids away to other districts, and we're also not going to take kids from other districts. So that allows all of the communities to maintain their public schools and to be able to have some predictability for their budgeting, some predictability for what population of kids they're going to have, and to stop us from being in a situation where we are potentially, having families and students with the financial resources and the wherewithal to say, I am going to drive my kid to this other school 20 miles away that I somehow think is better for my child. And then we're leaving behind the kids and the families that don't have the resources to make that choice. It just starts to create this real inequitable, somewhat segregated system over time. It could easily have the effect of closing smaller and rural schools over time. There's a lot of open questions for us in Portsmouth about what this could mean for our area agreements with SAU 50. There's a lot of open questions about what this would mean for tuition for Lister and our ability to even collect that tuition. There's a lot of questions about fairness for sports, for theater, for all sorts of extracurriculars that kids might move in or out of districts to participate in. Any number of other questions, which I think Esther raised around the equity for special education, which are a huge concern, and any number of other concerns. I mean, I think around the state, school boards are pretty uniformly concerned that at least as it's being contemplated right now in Concord, there's not enough clarity around what the rules would be, what the process would be, where the funding would come from. And for all of those reasons, a lot of communities are looking at 0 in, 0 out as a way to take a pause and potentially just preserve stability for our public schools. And then maybe down the line, there's a broader conversation to have, but that's just the broad brush of it. I see a hand, so I'll stop giving a soapbox speech over here. Byron?
Yeah, I just maybe not well versed enough to understand how we can even do this. Like, I guess my understanding.
We us or we Concord?
We the state of New Hampshire.
No, I mean like how the I guess like what's the mechanic where we at the city or the school district can say the state has said the open enrollment is a thing, but we can like what is the mechanical lever that we are pulling to like
So NHSBA, which is the legislative lobbying organization for our school boards, has given the guidance that there's 2 levers that school districts have to respond to this. One is a policy that's later in the packet tonight, where we would direct our superintendent potentially to look at enrollment capacity across all of our schools based on a variety of metrics and determine based on that how many people we
that's
have
like the
room for.
incoming potentially. Like I can see that
Correct.
being a barrier for
And then as a
yeah.
separate, because it is a budget issue, which local districts have control over, because the funding mechanism for open enrollment right now is that the sending district would have to pay the receiving district somewhere between 80% and 100% of the cost of that kid. So there's a budget implication, and because we are in charge of our budgets, we have the ability to be in charge of how many kids we are going to pay for to go somewhere else, because that is a cost to our taxpayers. And, in a hypothetical math equation, if we back of envelope lose, say, 5 kids to another district, and let's just say it's 20,000 a kid, that's a teacher. And so there's a lot of budget implications for staffing, for programming, for facilities maintenance and all sorts of other things. And that's why districts have the authority to set those enrollment numbers.
How confident do we think NHBA, NHBA?
NHSBA, yeah.
SBA, like how confident are we that their take on these levers are gonna hold? I mean, cause I think, yeah,
I would say I am fairly confident that no matter what happens, if there's some version of this that passes in Concord and some version of this that districts around the state decide to pass locally, I'm fairly sure it will go to court.
Yeah.
How that comes out, I could not begin to guess.
Who gets to be the first plaintiff? We'll see.
I mean, there's just so many unanswered questions. We don't even know if a student chooses to go to one school and then leave halfway through the year, then who owns that student? If parents have to pay the difference between the receiving district's cost and what the sending district pays, which is also part of it, and they don't pay, we kick the kid out of school, we don't know. But there's so many, we don't have any idea how special education transportation is accounted for. Like, there's just a lot of, and every one of those points, there will probably be a lot.
no, I agree, it's a cluster, I just, yeah, it was good to see, I guess I'm, yeah, I guess there's some level of hopefulness around like ability to defend, but we'll see, yeah.
All we know right now is the best guidance we've had from our city attorneys is that the process we're talking about with the council would be the right process for us to pursue. And the guidance from NHSBA is to look at enrollment capacity broadly on an annual basis, if that's a policy we pass. That is a way for us to document how we think the amount of space we have is the right amount of space, if that makes sense. So will there be litigation? Most likely, but is the approach we're taking also, as far as we understand the law right now, is that the right path? That seems to be the advice that we're getting. So
Okay, thank you.
I see Nancy and then I think Lee.
I guess my question is, maybe this is kind of what you were saying, if it becomes state law, we have to abide by it, correct? And you're talking about possible litigation. And I guess my second question is, who pays for that? If it becomes state law, it's like the Parental Bill of Rights. We have to do that, even if we don't think it was the best thing for our school district. It's the state law and we have to do it. Because, I mean, what I've read is, this looks like it might go through and the governor says she's gonna sign it. So if it passes, what do we do? Do we not comply and then we have litigation, and do we have to pay for that?
So as the law's written right now, there's nothing that tells us how many kids we would have to take.
Right.
And so, I mean, if your school is full, we'll just take them, like if we have, say, 4 classrooms and each of those classrooms can take 20 kids and we've already got 80 kids, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's physically not space. Like you can't put more people into that space. You have one teacher in the front of the classroom. So there's some ability for districts to make a determination based on their experience, their facilities, their staffing, and all of these things. The law doesn't say how many kids you have to take or how many kids you have to let leave. But I imagine there will be some amount of healthy debate, assuming that it becomes law, about what the right way is for districts to handle it. And all we can really do at this point is put forward what we believe our way should be. If we have to pivot, we have to pivot.
And I would just say that I think we've been in times when we went through some of the conversation in relation to some of the federal money and what we're responding to or not, where we had conversations sometimes about we're not sure where the law is, or we don't agree necessarily where the interpretation was. I think this is a situation where we are not actively taking action that we believe is against the law. Like we believe that this is in line with the law. Now people could, because of not everything, single thing in a law is spelled out. So it is possible that someone else could interpret it and say, well, we think that's not the right interpretation and we should do something else. And then somebody could end up in court in that situation. But I don't think this suggested action is openly in violation of the law.
Yeah.
So.
No, I
It is
agree.
not
I
like
think
the Parents' Bill
this
of
action
Rights.
is correct.
Right.
But I'm just saying, what happens if?
And we need to reassess.
Mhm.
Anyway, so.
Can I speak?
California has open enrollment. It's where I used to live. So how their open enrollment works is kids got to put on a wait list, right? So their neighborhood town, the kid's 44 on the wait list. So they might have to go somewhere else. And how schools pivoted out there was they specialized in something, right? So like if you are really into like the sports or the sciences, so that's one model that is out in California. But typically families would get waitlisted and they would apply for all the schools to see where they could get into kindergarten at. And then they have to wait and see what happens as the summer goes
The
on.
law as drafted right now for New Hampshire allows students to transfer to any district in the state with available capacity. And that's why we're having this discussion about how we are going to define capacity. I saw Lee and then Steve.
So two things come to mind. One is that we're now publicly stating that we're trying to frustrate the policy that,
Correct.
so,
As is most every school district in the state of New Hampshire.
right, but doing it publicly kind of actually, doesn't that invite, I'll say, a legal challenge?
No, almost every district put it on their warrant articles on March 10th that they would have 0 in, 0 out.
And then number two, how does this impact Lister?
We don't know.
I think it's not.
Because our model is to try.
Right, but we charge, but in terms of tuition to Lister, we don't charge a regular, we charge a higher amount.
Right.
For inbound kids, and so what's not clear is what amount would folks be paying if they were coming into Lister because they felt like, because there's a legal capacity. So these are the types of questions that we don't have answers to, so that makes it really difficult operationally.
Okay.
I'm asking prematurely, man. I'm just thinking like because the model for Lister is.
Part of our model at Lister is built upon the premise that we were trying to have a certain number of tuition students to offset the costs of the rest of the program. Yeah.
Just gonna say that the states where this has been more successful are states that provide significantly more funding for their schools. That the difficulty in New Hampshire is the proportion of state funding that schools that are provided by the state is so minimal that the reliance on property taxes in New Hampshire creates much greater inequities between property poor towns and property rich towns. So the results of this law will be that your property poor towns, if they lose, those families are more likely to move and those towns will lose even more funding. And so it's going to create even greater inequity within the state. And really, if the state really wanted this, I'll give you an opinion that they should be providing much more funding to make it operable. And since that's not proposed, it's not operable in my opinion.
Oh, that's a fair point. Other questions? So I believe you would bring back to us a proposed recommendation that we would vote on to send to the council for their consideration.
That's the point.
And potentially at our next meeting.
Give me help.
Okay. Thank you. We will move on to consideration to eliminate policies and turn it back to Pip.
Thank you. So this is a follow-up to one of the policies that we just approved, which takes the place of this tri-coded policy. So really, although it looks like 3 separate policies, it's actually just one with 3 different names that appears in 3 different sections of our policy manual, but it's all the same policy. Is there a motion to rescind this policy?
Do you want them as a block, those 3?
Yes. Sorry, I called it a policy, but technically, yes, it would, I guess we have to vote on all 3 of them.
Policies listed, GI.
There's a second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion of this one? This is in relation to the automatic external defibrillators.
Seeing no hands, roll call vote, please.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Booz,
Yes.
Jennifer Shum.
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
We now move on to consideration and approval of several policies for first reading and back to Viv.
Thank you. And back to enrollment. So let's start with that one. And Lisa, I might let you speak to this one. But although we may have just heard all we needed to hear about it, but first, is there a motion to approve that policy for first reading, enrollment policy JF?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is the policy that NHSBA is recommending that boards consider. This used to be an optional policy and many districts, including ours, did not really consider it necessary.
Mhm.
And as the open enrollment conversation has been going on at the state level, NHSBA changed this to a recommended policy so that districts could start to look at how we define capacity. Because in the version of the Senate bill on open enrollment that has the hearing tomorrow in Concord, what they talk about is districts potentially accepting students where they have available capacity. So in order to decide what available capacity is, this policy would direct our administrative team to look annually at how they define capacity based on a long laundry list of criteria. So that was a somewhat long-winded wind up to that. But that's the short answer. I don't know if there are
I have a question.
questions, but Nancy.
If we go, let's say we determine our capacity is X, and then when comes time to register kids, we're at X plus 1, we have to take that 1, correct? If you're saying we don't have room for that student because we're at capacity, but we have a Portsmouth student that wants to come to our school, we have to provide for that student,
For the
correct?
purpose of open enrollment, that is capacity for out-of-district people to come into the district.
Okay, so we're not talking.
Would not turn,
Right.
this would not.
You know,
force us
if
to turn away
somebody
enforcement.
lives here and wants to send their child to our schools, that capacity, we will
Yeah.
have to find a way to adjust, so.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Correct. And I believe we had one piece of language, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for my notes on this, one piece of language that we wanted to consider adding to this that we just discussed this morning in the policy committee.
11 to the list.
Correct. Here we go, sorry, too many policies in my folder here. So there were two things that we were contemplating adding to the language. And I will tell people what they are and then just make a motion. But one was to add to line 28, which looks at program-specific limits. So that says desired caps for courses, programs, class levels, co-curricular activities, and then add extracurriculars and athletics as well, just so that it's clear that those would also be part of the capacity discussion. And then we also proposed to consider our collective bargaining agreements when we're considering capacity, because we do have some language in those contracts that looks at the number of students who can be in a room. So
That would become number 11.
that would become number 11. Did we, I'm so sorry, I'm having one of those days. Do we already have a motion to?
We have a motion to approve
Okay.
AF, yep.
So can we make a friendly amendment to add two language changes? One would be to add to line 28 after co-curricular activities, extracurriculars, and athletics. And the other piece of that friendly amendment would be to, after line 37, add a number 11 to say collective bargaining agreements related to class size. So that can also be contemplated.
Motions or make your motion accept.
Brian,
I
you're
make the
good?
motion.
Okay.
Fantastic. Any other discussion or questions on this? All right, then I will take a roll call vote to pass this on first reading with those two changes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump.
Yeah.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
passed.
All right, next.
Okay, this next policy is employee student relations, GBEB. And the major, this policy had been previously recommended, but it is now required by law. And the major update to this one was addition of prohibiting staff from transporting students to medical appointments, which had not previously been enumerated there. And then we had some discussion on the policy level about in the NHSBA policy, there was provision for not having doors locked or lights off with students in a room. And we elected language that simply said that students should not be in a room where the door was locked with by themselves with a staff member. So are there questions or comments about this policy?
I have a question.
It's for a motion on this one.
Gonna get a motion.
Sorry.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Okay, now are the questions? Yes.
It's only because my head goes there because I obviously used to be a teacher, but if there was like a drill, right, or active shooter or something like that, like when I see the staff member alone in the room with the door locked, I don't know, just something to bring up. Like, I don't know if like everything goes out the window in those crisis situations, which I would think any human would act appropriately, but
Valid question.
yeah.
we do have separate policies though that cover those
That-
types of.
Okay.
We have a whole bunch of emergency procedure policies that are separate.
That go above
that
and
would
beyond.
Kick in
Yes.
as soon as there's.
Is that language in 12, that was NHSBA language or that was our language?
I believe it was NHSBA
SBA.
language. And so you can see where it was crossed out. They also included with the door closed. We talked about various scenarios where if someone's trying to de-escalate a student, they might turn the lights off because the lights can, exacerbate the problem. So we wanted to allow for maximum flexibility, but still keep children safe. But I think I would assume we would interpret an emergency scenario a little bit differently.
I would assume so.
That is a good question. We could add except in emergency situation.
No, I don't think you need to like
No.
pick
That's okay.
the everything. I just wanted to point that out that there could be a scenario where a teacher or faculty member does have to be.
It is valid.
This is specifically
Save
about
the student
interactions
Yeah,
with
yeah,
kids
yeah.
that could,
Be questionable.
yeah.
Okay, any other?
I have
Yes.
a question. If the door is locked and a student is in there, is there a window where you can see inside? So you can be outside and you see what the student is doing inside?
Or it's the student with.
Oh,
the
you're
teacher
thinking like
that's
like seclusion?
No.
Yeah, I think this is specific to when a staff member is inside the room with the student.
in the locked door.
And it would depend on the space, I guess, whether there was a window or not.
Okay.
Any other questions? Roll call vote on this one, please.
Kip Clues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow.
Yes.
Ryan French.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claver.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
approved first reading.
Okay, next.
Is there a motion to approve the school calendar policy?
Second.
This one is pretty straightforward. It's been updated just to include some new legal requirements. And let's see, there were some language revisions to clarify what that the school year applies to both certified professionals and support staff. And then to limit the graduation date to no more than 5 school days or 30 instructional hours before the end of the school year, which already aligned with our practice. Any questions or comments about this one?
I have a question. Line 83, where it says Columbus Day, is it possible to put, remember how our students lobbied so hard to change that to Indigenous People Day? Is it possible to put Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day?
Funny you should ask that, but state law now no longer permits that.
No way.
Yes, we did have that
Yes, way.
discussion.
You're not
That's right.
sure.
Welcome
There
to.
was a rider on the back of another bill.
How hard high school
Worked so hard.
Yes.
to get that?
That in fact
Students.
is part of the state law updates that we had to modify this for.
Yes.
That was a hard one to choke.
Yeah.
I wish you could do
And our
both.
students spoke so eloquently to the idea
Yeah.
of that change at the council and with us.
So the law is that
However-
now that anywhere that date is described, it must be described as Columbus Day in the
Correct.
plan.
That is state law.
Or it's, because it refers back to, it's not just Columbus Day, but Columbus Day is the only one that's affected. It's a list of other ones, and it's all, all governmental agencies will refer to these, as laid out in law.
Correct.
So, and it was snuck into another bill to make happen. Unfortunately.
I have one question that I feel like I have every time we have the calendar come up, which is how early can we pass it? So we say March 1st in here as
What
the
was our date this year?
final calendar?
We were in November this time around. Trying to remember.
I don't remember.
Is there an operational reason that the drop dead on that needs to be March 1st, or could we potentially make that?
So, yeah, I don't think we usually go, I mean, you can make it earlier if you like.
I would, how early would be reasonable? I mean, I don't want to create problems, but I do think our families and our staff always appreciate knowing sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Sure.
For planning purposes.
Say January,
January 30th.
30th, whatever, something, well, not January 1, because we're not in school.
Not sure.
February 1st, you can move it forward 1 month.
Right, February 1, whatever. I mean, my intent would be that we're done with that.
December.
Well in advance. I get nervous about
All right,
something that creates no flexibility.
friendly amendment to at least say February 1 instead of March 1.
Second. Oh, no, I didn't second
okay?
it. Oh, I did second it.
You
Okay,
did
yes.
and leave, yep.
Is that okay, Lee?
Yep.
Okay. February, I get that.
And if that's not possible, Zach will let us know, right, Zach?
Well.
No, it'll be policy.
So,
He said he can do it.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote on that one, please, with the only change of
Nancy
February.
Claiborne,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lacy Rappaport.
Yes,
Passed.
thank you.
Okay, on to the advanced coursework and AP courses and dual enrollment policy. First of all, is there a motion to approve that one? Nancy, thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay. This one also is, has minor changes in response to legislative updates. Let's see. State, funding now limits dual and concurrent enrollment funding to 4 courses per year. The committee also discussed making sure that students students and families are adequately informed of their dual enrollment options. Which I think we felt was being done, but could be done even more now that this is, now that these opportunities are open to more people. And I think that's the most significant things that were updated in this policy. Questions, comments?
Motion to approve the policy, we get a motion.
We did.
We did.
Good.
And this one we did.
It was Nancy and Byron.
Second.
Sorry, missed that one.
I just had a comment.
It's a little complicated.
I love on line 12 where it says if advanced coursework is not available within the school district, administrators and school counselors assist students in identifying alternative means. I know we've had that for a long time, but I think that's really cool that we look for alternative programs for students if they can't find the course at the high school.
And I guess I'd piggyback on that, if I might, I would love to see this more widely promoted. As someone who has a high school senior who's staring down massive bills for college, I mean, this has the potential to really create a much more affordable way to start earning credits for many of our kids across CTE and pretty much every academic subject. And I think that some families are well aware of all of these possibilities. And I think that there are some kids that don't think about this until their, senior year. And the state starts paying for these courses in 10th grade. And not every student can take every subject at that level as a 10th grader, but there are certain kids in certain situations and certain subjects where that could be appropriate for them academically. And it can be potentially shaving semester, year, sometimes more for students off of their tuition bills when college comes around. So I do think anything that we can do to promote this more widely would be beneficial to kids. So put that out there.
We could do that in our community.
Yeah.
Saw you smile, I thought she's thinking the same thing.
Lee raised his hand.
Yeah.
So I guess my question, I have not looked at your essay, 188, 827. Does that suggest that the costs above the 4 credit, is that the law that suggests that the costs above 4 credits are actually responsible?
At this moment, correct me if I'm wrong on the pricing, but I believe it's $150 per class for up to the first 4. And then after that, you would have to pay whatever the sort of sticker price. That's heavily discounted off of the normal cost per credit at the community colleges and at UNH. But if you go over 4, then you potentially would have to pay the full price that anyone would pay for those credits. You could still do it, but it wouldn't be subsidized by the state. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know that there's that many kids that could handle that load. That's a substantial workload for students. So.
So we're ready for a roll call on that one too.
Okay, so Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
yes,
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
passed.
Okay, next.
Thank you. On the change of school assignment, JCA. Is there a motion to approve that one?
Second.
Thank you. This one was updated to include a new definition of approved private schools. And it's, to be clear, this is not something that would be impacted by redistricting. We had this conversation on the policy level that instead it's specific in very rare circumstances for situations that arise where a student might need to leave school because of some traumatic experience there or unusual circumstances with their family situation. It doesn't happen very often, and but we do have to have a policy on the books for it. The superintendent retains the authority to determine the appropriate reassignment. So that's solely the responsibility of the superintendent. And yeah, okay, that's all. That's enough of it. Any questions or comments?
Seeing none. Vote to approve on first reading.
Brian French,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Lee Hudson, Tish Campbell,
yes,
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport, passed.
Next.
Next
I'm
bullet.
good, moving right along.
We're good. Well, bullying prevention. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Um, this policy was entirely restructured, and organized to introduce some extra definitions. Some terminology was updated. There was expanded language around cyberbullying and electronic communication. And we had some internal discussions about education and prevention within some of our SEL programs. And that's the general update on that one.
And the other piece that, the reason that prompted this was now there's the provision in here, if there's bullying that's going on between students in schools in two different districts. So that's the big piece that's in here about how to handle that. Which is new because of the law that now looks over that.
What number are we at for that?
That comes in at around way down. So it's sort of folded in like on line 317, it talks a little bit about how that happens. It's sort of peppered throughout.
This one's a little harder to read because of all the
Yeah.
adjustments, but we have found, just as a general aside for on the committee, we've found a slightly different way of presenting the policies, which we're hoping is easier to digest in terms of of the way we mark them up, so that you can see what's added from the NHSBA policy is what's underlined, and then what existed in our policy is crossed out. So it hopefully is a little bit easier to see what's changing than just trying to compare them side to side.
And it's always gonna be hard no matter, when you have this much whole scale rewrite.
Yeah.
There's not, you know, it's always a challenging markup.
Right, because it's sort of
Appreciate it.
completely.
Appreciate it. Yeah, try.
I have one question about this, because we do talk about the student code of conduct. Do we have that in the elementary schools to the extent that kids know what that is? And we might, and I'm just not aware of that, but
I
just
don't think it's
wonder-
called a code of conduct. I think that's policy terminology, but there are behavioral expectations. Yeah, school rules.
Just because when we get way down into the 400s and we talk about consequences, we make a lot of references to the code of conduct. So I just wasn't sure if that's the best way to refer to it. It may be.
I think administratively, we know what that is, and we could talk to adults about that, but I think language is gonna change developmentally with students.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Okay, Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Vic Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Meadow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Kleber.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson. Approved.
Thank you. All right, Pip. Two
All right.
more.
There we go. All right, the wellness policy, JLCF. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
So this policy requires us to have a district wellness committee, which we have had in the past, but not exactly in this format. So this creates a committee that would be more specifically attending to, or it would be made up of like nurses or school nutrition counselor, so no, what's she called, director of nutrition.
Yeah.
And people looking out for the sort of the physical health of students. We had some discussion about who to sort of refer back to in terms of standards for wellness. And we decided it was best to not to specify any sort of specific department or entity, but instead rely on our experts on our staff to determine how they understand the standards and what standards they hold us, or what standards we should be held to. Do we have questions or comments?
Add one thing, that's,
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Why don't you add first?
so this is also separate from our strategic planning committee related to student safety and well-being. And this policy, I think Patty will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's state mandated that we frame it in this exact way and set up this specific committee to look a lot at nutrition and physical activity. Like that's all in response to state law that requires that.
And it talks about policy IMAH that we talked about earlier. So there's a lot of things that are folded into this, specifically designated as tasks of the wellness committee, the district wellness committee. So yeah.
Jen and then Byron, I think.
I know that the people that are doing the school lunches, this is all really around school lunch for the elementary school level. I've heard it gets better in middle school, but like the food that they're giving the students is like packaged high fructose corn syrup, like food dyes. And I've had parents come to me to be like, you know, the school talks about putting my kid on XYZ, but like why is he being or she being fed this absolute, I don't want to say thank you. You know, and I just think like, especially those elementary kids, like they are learning so much. And I just like, I've seen other districts where it's not like that. So I've always, and as a, you know, I just always questioned, how do we kind of like look into that? So I don't know if this.
So I'll say this is definitely a topic amongst administrators, and there's been some dialogue about it. And it's about how we structure the program, how are we going to fund what it is that we want to accomplish. And I think there's real interest, and I had this conversation with, it was all administrators, but but particularly I know the elementary principals are particularly passionate about things. With the idea that we do some work rolling into the next budget season, that as part of our budget proposal, it'd be like this, so the board's informed and we can make a pitch. This is what we think we would need to do in order to have, and how we would invest, whether that is staffing, whether that is moving towards, I mean, we have, the city council has a provision where they're interested in universal meals for all kids. It's one approach. You know, it's in pricing out what that is and having kind of I was about to say a menu of options. But I'm gonna use that.
I know Oyster River, they partner with local farms in the town, and so like their beef stew was like amazing, like at a school. So I think there's other creative ways too, where there might be things that we could explore, or the school could explore.
And like I said, I think I've got a group, independent of even what's happening with this group. I have a group of very passionate elementary principals who are interested in putting some energy and time into having something ready for the next budget cycle to discuss.
I'm good.
Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed about this particular policy is that the physical activity aspect to it has, or at least it's a little bit weak in terms of minimum requirements and sort of defers to IMAH. But IMAH, I don't remember seeing like, I'll say, you know, time allotments and quantity associated with that. So I'm wondering if there's something that needs to be done about that.
Which lines?
373.
Yeah. Thank you.
So to my knowledge, the amount of physical activity in here was specified by statute as sort of the purview of this particular committee that the law is asking us to set up.
So they're the ones that would suggest the allotted time and.
This wellness committee, once it's established, is actually responsible for what's in IMAH and interpreting that. So the committee, through the charge given in this policy, would be responsible for what's in this policy as well as in AH.
How does that become enforceable?
Well,
That's
because
the
it would
confusing
be
part.
policy.
Second,
I mean, it would be policy, so
but the timeline isn't in policy.
it could be, but it's not yet. So maybe, well, if we amend IMAH in there potentially.
If you wanted to, at the board level, create a specific time amount, I think you would want to do a decent amount. Policy level, bring in principals to talk about what are the ramifications of, oh, I think 60 minutes would be great for all kids. Great. What does that mean? And how does that rock you throw in the pond ripple out to everything else that happens inside of the operation? So if you want to be specific, I think you need to do a lot of talking with folks about what that means and what the ramifications are.
So then maybe it does become more strategic. Which they were talking about earlier.
I think it's definitely a conversation we could have in policy. I also think that we haven't had a chance yet to map out our board retreat, but conceptually, I was thinking about whether we get direction from the board on what are the big issues that you want our main committees to look at over the next year, so that we have some sort of consensus around where we're all working, and we still have to iron that out. But I feel like too, in addition to sort of the time conversation, you know, there's some conversation about what does that actually look like to be meaningful physical activity. You know, there's certainly been middle school families over the years that have wondered about whether there could be some other version of outdoor time that's unstructured for those kids. And then if we do it, where would they go? Who would supervise them? How would it work? You know, the high school has a schedule that, you know, is blocked out without really recess at all, but our kids getting enough movement throughout the day may very much depend on their schedule and how far they're running from one end of the building to the other between classes. But, you know, I think we can look at it. We
Yeah,
want to look at it with principals and with,
Yeah,
you know.
I think anytime we get into these conversations, it's the conversations that are hard are not ones where we have the good choice versus the bad choice. It's competing goods. And I just want to have a very thoughtful conversation when you set very specific, non-flexible inputs into the system, that you're aware of the corresponding offsets that happen as a result.
Well, I wonder if this is one of these policies like that we should handle kind of like we're dealing with the homework policy right now. In terms of just trying to bring together more people to talk about it and more resources and research so that we can develop a policy that's really meaningful and appropriate,
The wellness committee
feasible.
is the group that you bring together to then iterate this policy that they're mentioned in.
Yeah,
I think that, and this one.
Yeah.
So the wellness committee can inform and iterate and edit, revise the wellness policy. So that's
we
the
need to
group
create the.
that
That
needs to
becomes a
be,
vehicle
that's
That creates the
they're
flexibility.
given the charge to do policies, setting out to do, plus pulling in whatever other policies.
So and that makes sense to me, Patty. So does that mean the board would not do final approval for these policies until the wellness committee has reviewed them?
No, because what it says in this policy is that if you look at line 22, 23, the superintendent in consultation with the director of school nutrition will facilitate development of updates to the district wellness policy, subject to school board approval, and will oversee compliance with the policy.
So we would approve it, then they could suggest, and then we would approve their recommendation.
But based on what they're talking about in these committee meetings about physical activity, about water bottles, about school nutrition, whatever else is in here, those are the things that would come out of that committee, including any changes to this very policy that creates that as the legislative or the quasi, I don't know.
But if you have
Sorry, my
specific,
head got into a tailspin when I was trying to figure
so
out.
if you have specific questions about IMAH, which is specific to physical activity and the time. I mean, that's definitely something that we could look at within our school board policy committee, I think independent of this committee if we want to.
Especially since we've already decided to bring it back to the policy committee, or at least back to the board.
So
So maybe we can do that work on IMAH, simultaneously
back.
move this forward, so we have a wellness committee.
so that we're
Mhm.
compliant with the state
Mhm.
law around that.
Right.
So there are two different tracks. This that's before us for first reading, if we pass it, we're just moving along the process to comply with the state law to have this policy and have that committee that's required. Separately, we can go back and look at IMAH in a more substantive way. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Absolutely. Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Meadow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Lee Hudson,
Yes.
approved.
Right.
One more.
One more. Emergency plan for sports related injuries. Is there, wow, thank
Second.
you. Amazing.
Okay.
Feel the finish line coming.
Yeah, right. Excuse me. Okay, this one includes new language for around a sports injury action plan, which conveniently we already have in place. Excuse me, and requirements around first aid and CPR training, and some just removal of outdated language choices that we made. Any questions? It's clearly the end of the night.
Seeing none.
Lee Hudson?
You asking me to actually comment?
No.
Oh, yeah, I know, I'm just kidding.
Tish
Yes.
Campbell. Tish?
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport. Brian French.
Yes.
Byron Meadow.
Yes.
Stephen Adler.
Yes.
Pip Blues.
Yes.
Jennifer Shump.
Yes.
Approved.
Yeah.
No more rolls. No more roll.
Okay. Thank you, Pip.
You all.
Moving on to committee updates. We have the policy committee minutes in there. We have the community engagement working group minutes in there from that meeting. And we also have the EC minutes in there. Want to say anything about that, or we have the minutes?
Well, the BEC was a Business Education Collaborative. That's the CTE program at the high school. That's a real, again, active, enthusiastic, positive thinking group, and the plans and the programs that are at our CTE program are really impressive, and there's a lot of plans to expand and make it better. So I really enjoyed going to that meeting. It was very uplifting. And I would suggest if you haven't seen the CTE area of the high school, it's really impressive to walk through there if you ever have a chance.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, I've got, as we're on the topic of committees, 2 requests for board members to join committees. And I know that we are all looking for more committees. The first one is a committee that was established by Councilor Rich Blaylock, which is a city blue ribbon committee on behavioral health. And their first meeting is Thursday, April 16th at 10 in the morning, and they're going to be meeting quarterly. And one of the reasons they're looking for school board representation is because, among other things, they're looking at youth mental health, and they're just looking for us to be a conduit of information about anything we might be doing in the schools or any needs that we're seeing that we think the city might want to be aware of. So they're looking for a board member who is available on Thursday mornings 4 times a year who would like to join that committee. I would gladly take any volunteers on the spot right now. If there are none at this second,
Do not need another committee, but I'm interested.
I was gonna say, I'll do it too.
I'll let you two flip a coin, but
Okay.
we would definitely like to have one person be able to go.
Scissors, bro.
No propane
Oh, no.
sisters. We can talk.
I'm actually really good at that, so.
Okay, so the first meeting is April 16th. I mean, we definitely like somebody to be there. Do you want to duke it out and just let us know?
You can do it, you can do it, and if like you can't go, I'll go,
Okay.
right?
All right,
That way?
great.
Okay.
All right, and I have
Wait,
one,
I'm sorry, what did you say the first?
now you want to know?
April
16th,
16th Thursdays.
from 10 a.m. to 11.
Just a quick question, is there a committee charter that can be shared?
I would say yes, there likely is one, and no, I do not have one at this time. But I imagine there was one at the council when they established it.
Yes, too.
And I can get that and share it out, and I don't have it at this moment. And we also have a request to have a board representation on Portsmouth Safe Water Advisory Group, which we have for a long time had a board member on. We had some turnover on our, I want to say that Genevieve Beckstead Muskie was the last board member to have that seat, and now that she's not on the board, we need another person to
When
What
does
is
it
the
meet?
gap in?
They're, let's see. I believe they also meet quarterly. I am not 100% sure when their next meeting is, but they just had one in March. So, let me see.
The Wednesday evening, right?
It's early.
What is?
So it is a safe water.
Oh, the
advisory
safe
group. So this is partly looking at contamination from police. This is also the group that took an interest in making sure that we had lead-free drinking water in schools a few years back. I mean, they do a lot of great work to make sure that our water supply is safe throughout the city, and certainly we have an interest in.
You have a volunteer.
Steve is signed up, and I'm looking, it looks to me like the meetings are 4 times a year at night from 6:30 to 8:30.
Well,
In
that
case that changes anybody's, you're already signed up.
won't interfere with skiing, so I'm fine with that.
Okay. So I'm putting you down for that one, Steve. Thank you. And I will send emails later to connect you guys with the people who are chairing those committees. And as a reminder, as you're going out into the world and all these committees, please do try your best to send back brief written reports if you're just visiting a city committee, and minutes if it is a school board committee. We're doing a pretty good job of that, but I'd like to keep it
Yeah,
going.
It's been great.
I
I will
think that's
say, I
it.
watched the video of that committee and it was made up of an enormous number of environmental engineers.
Yep. Any other committee updates? Okay. So for, oh, yeah, Pip.
Well, I actually wondered if you might want to give an update on, I just wanted to thank you for running a session with students on the
Aw.
policy committee. And I don't know if you want to say a little about that, but I think we got some great input from students during Student Government Day, thanks to Lisa and
That's
Patty
always
for running a.
Our kids are just so smart and so engaged, and they just have such a great perspective on everything. I mean, so I think Student Government Day, we had a very informal policy committee conversation where we wanted to get students who were there to talk to us about what they thought we should consider as we are updating policies on homework and attendance and AI and the dress code. They were just so thoughtful and smart and really just
Yeah.
fantastic.
Video great.
And Steve was there for a good chunk of it. Zach and Patty were there for part of it. And Davis came for a while with the student who was shadowing him. It's just a great opportunity. I hope that we can use it more in the future to get more feedback from our students. I wouldn't get too far down into the weeds about it, but they definitely raised some really compelling questions about AI. And if we're setting rules for kids, what should the rules for their teachers be? And how are we gonna know when it's okay and when it's not okay? And should it be the same for every class? Maybe not, because there's different needs if you're gonna be doing computer programming than if you're doing painting, you know, and just what does that look like? And they were really great about that. I think with homework, they brought up a lot of questions around, you know, how we should think about that in terms of what's the right amount of that to, how much should homework count in your grade? How should it be graded? What's the purpose of it? I mean, they asked a lot of questions that I feel like people in the room have been wrestling with for years. So they were really great. And I think we're definitely gonna take some of the feedback that kids gave us into the policy committee as we're looking at some of those policies. Hope to have an even bigger group of kids to give us that kind of feedback in the future. And one of the things that they asked is if we might in some future meetings be interested in going to them in some way, whether we go to a student government meeting or whether we go into the school at some point so that more kids can give us their perspective. And I actually thought that was a good idea. I don't know when that would happen, but certainly the more we can hear from them so that the policies that we're making that affect them actually make sense to them, I am all for that. It's a great day.
That's great. Yeah.
Did I see a hand over here or? Okay, so for future agenda requests, I will say now that we've all agreed that we're gonna be at our retreat on May 12th. Brian and I need to sit down and kind of map out what that will look like. And I hope maybe sometime in the near future, we'll be able to give you all some sort of broad brush about what types of things we might cover so that you all can give us some feedback about what you'd want to discuss as part of that conversation. We usually use it to set goals for the board. And certainly as our strategic plan keeps going out more years, we have to think about what do we want beyond 3 years to look like. So stay tuned. And I don't know if there's any other things at this point to say about that, but do we have anyone in the room who wants to do public comment? Seeing none. Did we do it?
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Second, I mean, you always make that motion.
Liz, you in favor of adjourning?
Yes, I am.
I know,
Thanks, Liz.
adjourn.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.